All right, welcome back to the show today. I have a guest that you are going to absolutely fall in love with. I had about a 3 minute video sent to me about our guest, who is Simoriah Stogner, and I'm sure I screwed that up just then. Simoriah Stogner. I had a 3 minute video sent to me of who we're going to shorten to Sim, and I watched the 3 minute video, and I immediately tried to find her phone number, her inbox. Like I wanted to, get a hold to her, and I got a hold to her, and asked her, could we have coffee one day? Because I was inspired by the 3 minute video. So you're fixing to get a video that's going to be longer than 3 minutes. Simariah is a senior manager of tech services and IT operations at Jack Henry. 3 months after high school graduation, with a 6 month old on her hip, she was hired at Jack Henry. She had an entry level position at a service desk and did not even know how to answer the email at an IT firm like Jack Henry, right? But now we're 18 years down the road, and Sim has been climbing and fighting her way into great positions, onto great stages where she has, spoke publicly. She has, had audiences that were really big and has done all of that in spite of not necessarily being born with a silver spoon in her mouth. So, Sim, man, let's get started, man. I'm so excited to share you with our audience.
I am so excited to be a part of the Never Stop Getting Better podcast, John. I'm excited to share with your audience. I am inspired by you and the content that you put together, and I hope that our episode is going to inspire others too.
I will guarantee you that we're going to inspire a lot of people. The day I left the coffee shop down there, I was on cloud nine because in my profession, we do run across a lot of people that use their situation as an excuse, and they repeat the cycle that has been passed down to them from generation to generation to generation. And what I was so inspired about was I've not known many people in my life because I was born to a great mom and dad, like I was raised correctly and, had every chance in the world. But, like you weren't necessarily given the same cards that I was given, but you didn't ever let that hold you back. It doesn't stop you from, dreaming big dreams and continuing to this day to chase bigger dreams every day of your life. So I guess where I'd like to start is this, tell me, take me through your childhood. Like take me through what, growing up as, Simariah Stogner. Tell me what that was about.
Okay, all right. So this can get a little long-winded, but if it does, just roll me in, okay, John? So, I come from at least 9 generations of homelessness and poverty. And so that was my childhood experience. I can remember all the way back to being 2 to 3 years old, living in those types of conditions. And so basically what that meant for me and my siblings is that we often lived at campsites, where we would pitch tents and live literally on the ground, or we would live in condemned housing, essentially a low fee, but some sort of shelter from some of the winter and weather elements. But definitely didn't have the necessities like hot water and electricity or heat. Or if it wasn't one of those environments, it was some sort of sheltered housing that was offered through government entitlements or community services. I experienced that cycle my whole childhood. I'm one of 8 in my sibling group. My parents split after having 6 kids together, and when they split, I was just 4 years old.
Mm.
And when they split, we were left, my mom was left with all of the children, and that was in a condemned house that didn't have electricity, hot water, or heat, and it was in the middle of winter.
Mm.
It was so difficult to live through that I can remember my parents would basically tell us to take our old milk jugs after dark and go over to the neighbor's house and steal water from their water spigot. And then we use the water for, of course, resources, drinking, cooking, etc. So it was extremely difficult to basically have to live in a survival state all the time, especially as a child. I can only imagine how difficult that was for my mother, who was single with six children to care for. I'm the third born, so that gives you even more perspective. Her children were all born very close in age. The sister before me is only 11 months older than me. We were born in the exact same year. She was born in January. I was born in December. And then the sister that came right after me, a very similar situation, just 13 months younger than me. And so I can only imagine trying to raise children and take children from campsite to campsite and what those situations were. And so that was my experience for all of my childhood. And then once I got into my teenage years, I really started to understand that that was not what I wanted with life. I wanted some sort of stability. I wanted placement. I wanted heat. I wanted hot water for my showers. I wanted food that I didn't have to worry about what I was going to eat for the day. And so I found myself in condemned housing, still trying to stay with my mother at that time. But since she wasn't able to provide some of the basic necessities, she was dealing with drug addiction at that time. Um, I basically had to find my way to provide for myself and even my young siblings. And so I fibbed about my age. I got a job at a local restaurant. I was just 14 whenever I got my very first job. Um, and basically that job was a gift to me in life because it gave me some financial income, but it also gave me a meal every day that I had to work. And so I could guarantee that I was going to get to eat that day. So that was a real gift to me. At that time, there was also another gift to me in my life, and that was a young boy named Dustin. Dustin was my best friend, and we connected initially because we had a lot in common, but we also had a lot of challenges in life. He was dealing with parents that had addiction and mental health issues that were unaddressed, and so they're very volatile and abusive. And I was dealing with parents that were basically absent and not providing. And so when he and I collided in our universe, we really gravitated towards each other and in a lot of different ways. We found companionship, but also we found that he had strengths that I didn't possess and I had strengths he didn't possess. And so it was kind of like the perfect team dynamic. So he and I got into a relationship. He became my boyfriend. And then after meeting him for about a year or so, I was about 15. Um, I I really got tired of the abuse that I was dealing with. And so I called him up one day and I begged for him to come get me. And so I ran away that day and I never went back to that
Mm.
trailer. I never went back to being with my family in that regard. Dustin and his mom rescued me that day and they rescued me from what felt like a really bad situation. And at the time, I didn't quite understand, but I was rescued into another really bad situation. And so after spending some time around Dustin's family and understanding that there was a lot of fertility and abuse, he and I finally said, we got to get the hell out of here. And so we were about 15 to 16 years old, and we made the decision that we were gonna go out on our own. And at 16 years old, Dustin and I became adults. We paid our own rent. He found a man that was willing to rent a trailer to us. The trailer had hot water, electricity, heat, those are things that I didn't have. The trailer was super, super old and it was in the middle of nowhere, but it was better than what I had prior to that. And then also it allowed Dustin and I to unite and just kind of figure out life because we weren't necessarily getting guidance in the situations that we were in. So after just a few months of being with Dustin and living out on our own as 16-year-old adults, I found out that I was pregnant. And that was really, really hard. I was very freaking scared, because I was a young girl that never saw a father figure stay in their children's life, first of all. So I didn't expect that to be any outcome that I was going to have an opportunity to live out. But when I told Dustin, he was super excited. And that really caught me off guard. Like I was bawling and in tears and afraid that I was going to be left alone with a baby in a world that I didn't know how to navigate myself. And I was trying to do it as a 16-year-old that was trying to be an adult. And he reassured me through his response that he was excited and thrilled with the opportunity to be a better father than who he ever didn't get to experience and then who I had. And so Dustin and I have been together since 2003. We're getting ready to celebrate our 22-year anniversary in
Wow.
April 29th. And we've been married for more than 10 of those years now. We got married in 2013. And so, we went from challenging beginnings. We've grown up together from being teenagers into young adulthood. And then now we're shifting into our middle age years. And we have five beautiful children. The oldest one is now 19. The youngest one is 1 year old. So our family's
19 and
slowly
1.
growing. Yeah. Yeah. So that's kind of been my experience is a lot of poverty, homelessness, and trying to figure out life, without much role models, without soliciting for them throughout the journey, which is definitely something I've learned to do. One of my life principles is to make meaningful connections. And I think ultimately that's how I've been able to drive myself out of some of those circumstances and into a life that feels a lot more prosperous and a life that I know is going to be a legacy that I can leave for my children and hopefully figure out how we sustain that for multiple generations.
Wow. I hope everybody listening, can understand, how awesome of a human you are today. You're absolutely beautiful. You are inside and out. Like you are, an extreme professional. You are, killing it at your profession. And everything you just said about life, is like it's crazy, because one of the things that even from the day we had coffee that just stood out to me that I have thought about probably 100 times was me and my sisters would take the milk cartons and go to our neighbor's house to get water. Like that's not, most people aren't having to do that, not in the United States, not, here in Missouri. Like that's not, normal. What I would ask is, when did you fit? Because that's what you were born into, and that was what life was like. How did you realize, or when did you realize that there could be a better way? Like, how did you know that this is not the way everybody lived? Like, when you went to school, you started seeing other people. Like, how did that thought process come together, and how old were you?
That is such a good question because I can very vividly remember some of those forward thinking type of mindset shifts for me. And very vividly, I can remember being a fourth grade child and hanging out with one of my little sisters. And basically, we were left locked out of our trailer that day from my parents after school. And so we were basically left and we were frustrated. And so I remember having this profound conversation with her about how when I'm in a position to where I can provide and guide, that I would never be the way that I was being treated. And so just as a fourth grader, I started recognizing that I didn't have good providers. I didn't have good leaders guiding me and mentoring me and coaching me or my siblings. And so very young as a fourth grader, I can recall some of those conversations. But I feel like I've been a life learner literally my whole life. I have found myself always curious. I ask a lot of questions of a lot of people. Basically, everyone that I come encounter with, I try to ask questions and gain additional perspective or some sort of knowledge. And so, because I was in situations throughout my whole childhood where there was instability, that meant that there was new cultures that I was being exposed to with every place that I had to move to, whether it was a shelter, a campsite, or condemned housing in a trailer park. There was always a shift in new people around me that I had a chance to learn from it. Whether I learned good or bad, I was very intentional to assess for these are things to not do. And I learned that pretty early on first before learning things of what I should be doing and gravitating towards the positive role models. But a way that I really positioned myself in my childhood to gravitate towards positive role models is I fantasized and dreamed of being a model when I was a young girl. And so before the internet was a thing, I would gain access to magazines. I worked at a Chinese restaurant and they would have magazines like the 17 magazine and some of the local magazines there for us to read, or as customers are waiting, they would be able to flip through a magazine. And so as the magazines aged, I would take them home and I would just start scrapbooking vision boards
Mm,
and just visualizing a life that was more glamorous than the tent that I was camping in, or the trailer that I was having to live in that didn't have electricity. And so I really opened my mind when I was a child through exposure of like magazines and dreaming for a greater purpose. At that time, I thought I wanted to be in the magazines for being beautiful. But as I got older, that didn't come to fruition. Truthfully, that wasn't my purpose in life, is what I found out. Here I am at 37 years old, and I am in the magazines, but it's not just for being beautiful. It's because of what I'm doing and the impact that I'm making in my industry or in the community and the people that I'm serving for why I'm actually being put into the magazines now. And so that dream ultimately it did morph, but it wasn't for just, the aesthetics elements. But I didn't necessarily know whenever I was fantasizing and dreaming up that life that I would actually become in the magazines for the reasons that I'm in the magazines. And it feels a lot more purposeful and a lot more intentional, and it feels like it's the best way I could have been put in a magazine if I was ever going to get to live out that dream for the reasons that I am today. So I've said a lot there. What should we unpack with this?
I'm gonna tell you what's outstanding is, people have always said, if you can dream it, you can achieve it. Like you got to be able to see it first, and although your living conditions weren't great, you were able to see it in a vision. You were able to see it in a dream. You were able to see it in magazines. Like you do have to be able to see it before you can go get it. And you saw it. You didn't let your circumstances determine what your future could be. Now, one of the things you said that just, really caught my attention and it was a blessing was, you got a job when you were 14 and what a gift that was, right? There are a lot of kids that get a job and they don't consider that a gift, like they consider that a chore. They consider that oh my Lord, here I go. Like how do you have the wits about you? And I guess because of what you had or didn't have, that you actually saw that as a gift. Did you see that as a gift when you were 14, or now looking back on it, it's a gift?
At 14 years old, I definitely saw it as a gift because at that time I was lacking critical resources, just to survive in the modern world, or frankly, just out in nature, because that was my living situation. I was camping in tents, and so there's a survival element that I ultimately knew that I had to get out of that. So, yeah, I don't know if I answered your question directly,
Most
but
certainly. Most
okay.
certainly. And I'll tell you another thing that stood out to me when we met that we haven't talked about yet, but there was an incident that happened when Dustin came to the house. And I don't know if you were trying to leave with him and maybe your dad or your stepdad didn't want you to leave and something, and Dustin stood up for you.
Yeah.
Like, I just remember the feeling I had because, when I was sitting in front of you, I could see your body language. I could see what did it mean to you to have a young man stand up for you?
Oh man, this is so good because that's one of the most profound moments of my life. And still to this day, I think, one of the threads that keep my heart bonded to Dustin. Um, I never had anyone protect me when I was a kid. Um, all the way up to that point, no one ever stood up for me, protected me. My parents became absent, or they would turn a blind eye to abuseful situations and act oblivious to different circumstances that were what felt like to me are happening right in front of their faces. And so, because I never had anyone in my childhood really protect me and keep me shielded from horrible situations and circumstances, when Dustin did that, I knew there was going to be some sort of soul tie and bond because he was the very first person I had experienced in my life who didn't only care about me because of my beauty, he cared about me for being a human.
Mm,
And he understood what I was facing to stand up to grown men who were horrible men, truthfully, and to stand ground for me. That was I'll never forget it. I still feel like to this day he is still that for me. I don't have to live, in such harsh conditions, but I feel protected
mm.
because I know that he has a courageous and brave mentality and personality, and he's proven it. I've been with him for 22 years, and I've always had this sense of I'm protected and I'm safe and a sense of security and stability, with that man and I being united. So he's
Yeah,
probably my soul mate for the rest of life, because I like I said, I know that we're really bonded. We've gone through a lot of traumatic experiences together, but we've also grown up as humans together, and we're still growing every day. We talk about new visions and purpose and dream together, and we learn together every single day.
I absolutely love that, and I would say, time promotes or exposes people, and time has promoted Dustin to you. And I think I got this right. I think when y'all decided to strike out on your own, that he intentionally dropped out of school and went and got a job so that you could actually graduate high school. And you
Yep.
actually graduated high school with a 6 month old on your hip. Is that right?
You're right. Yeah. Dustin and I were in the same grade. And then when we found out that we were gonna expect a baby and we accepted responsibility for that, he decided that he needed to step out of the school because it was a significant time commitment. And one of us needed to have some source of income. But it was really intentional for Dustin to be the one to step out of that. He wanted to make sure that I had the opportunity to fulfill my studies and get my diploma because we both came from multiple generations of dropouts. He knew that the diploma was going to lead us towards a more financially healthy lifestyle. We didn't know what it was at that time. We just knew the criticality of having a high school diploma and also the criticality of having a source of income so that we could provide for ourselves and now an infant. So he dropped out and went full time at a local Sonic, and he did that into his young adult life. At the same time, I was able to finish school, so I would drive myself back and forth to school. I did have a baby at graduation, and so I found a job right after graduation at the daycare. And so I was able to take my baby to work with me. And so that was kind of how I was able to start securing some of my own income. I was at the same time I was doing all that, I was pursuing industry knowledge and attending career fairs and really trying to figure out, doing a lot of job research and industry research, trying to figure out how I was going to lead myself out of poverty and how I was going to lead myself into having financial success in some way. So at that time, we were basically couch surfing off of some of our siblings' furniture and stuff, just trying to find somewhere to go so that we could go to school or work the very next day. Dustin did end up getting his diploma, but he ended up getting it through Ashworth University, which was a university down in Georgia, and they offered remote learning. So he graduated just a couple years after I did in 2008, but it was through one of the first iterations of high school diploma through a remote learning situation. And it was very much old school where they would send him textbooks and then the bubble sheets, and he would have to fill in, like you're doing an ACT test or whatever back in the day. So he did a couple years of his high school studies all through virtually and then mailing stuff back through the U.S. Postal Service. So yeah, I'm really excited that both of us did get our diploma. We both led ourselves into certification programs. We went into college. We neither of us finished college because our degree programs. Ultimately, they weren't serving us a curriculum that was very innovative to what our real life experiences were. So, for example, I was pursuing a tech degree, but the technology that was being taught in my textbooks through my university were 3 years sunset from my real life experience. So at that time, I was already at Jack Henry. I was in a tech company exposed to technology, and I decided I need to leave college because it was costing me too much time and money and I wasn't gaining knowledge. So we pivoted and we went more of the trade route. And he's got an interesting background too. It's finance, fintech, consumer loans. It's cannabis management, retail management. It's interesting. And then of course I led myself into learning about technology and discovering a passion that I never knew was in me whenever I was just getting started.
That's awesome. And I know we're going to jump into that part in just a minute. To jump out of the history, to jump out of the childhood. I want to ask this because I really don't know. Like I know we talked about this a little bit, but what did like your biological dad, what is, what has become of him, what your mom, okay, and your siblings, like what of your siblings have they been doing? What are they, up to today? Do you stay in touch with all of them, none of them, half of them? Like what's life like for the rest of your, biological family?
Okay. So uh, it's unfortunate that I have to give an update that is basically my mom is disabled and stagnant, not necessarily developing or, growing, but she seems content and stuck in truthfully, a victim's mindset, reliving the past experiences
Sure.
and the trauma from when my father left and how she had to figure out life between that time. And so I would say, unfortunately, stagnant, not necessarily developing or growing, also living on disability, and so essentially, unfortunately, capped. My biological father, I see him about once a year on Christmas, and that's just kind of how I like to protect myself and energy. Um, a very intellectual man, but capped himself and not necessarily pursuing anything greater than himself. But I tell you, if you come across him and you talk to him for 5 minutes, you'll understand me a little bit better and how I communicate and then how I just kind of present myself. The intellect is definitely probably from his lineage. And it's just unfortunate he kind of staggered out and not necessarily fulfilling a greater purpose. And then my siblings, mostly in touch, but over the last couple of years, Dustin and I grew our family, and that has also been at the time where we're growing our careers. And
Sure.
so we've been really intentional about our immediate family and connecting with them, developing them, because we also have adult children or teen children going into adulthood. And so we don't really get with the sibling group too much. We used to get together all the time. The last Christmas party that we host at our house, we had nearly 70 people that were just my siblings and their children, so all the cousins. It's really remarkable the growth of the family with that sibling group. Some of my siblings have become homemakers and they've married with partners that are providers. And then some of my siblings are leading in business. I would say not necessarily S&P 500 leading in business, but leading in small businesses and specifically a couple that stand out are solar business. And so I got a brother that's leading with his wife a solar business. And then I have a sister that's leading with like a design business that creates wedding designs and things like that. And so they're pretty interesting people still, I would say, but I don't get to see them too often. But like I said, it's pretty intentional as we're really invested in our children and careers right now this cycle. I
That's
do foresee
fantastic.
that it'll come back around eventually when
Sure.
the babies are a little bit older and we're not so worried about, getting them sick or whatever there is.
I understand that when you got five kids and their range in age is that wide, you got your hands full and you work full time and life. Like you probably don't have a whole lot of time for a lot of extra stuff. Okay, let's fast forward.
Okay.
You get a job at Jack Henry, which I've come to know Jack Henry a little bit, through my time here in Missouri and in Springfield, and it seems like a fantastic company. Well, you get a job there, not knowing a whole lot about IT, not knowing a whole lot about anything when you're 17, 18 years old. And I think you're just like returning emails or something. But, the funny story was, you get the job at Jack Henry and you don't really know how to do the job. And you actually had a buddy that kind of helped you out. So talk me through, you took a job that you really didn't know what to do, learning how to do it, and then, you know, chasing a bigger vision for 17 or 18 years since then.
Okay. So I came across Jack Henry at one of those high school career fairs I was telling you about. And when I did come across them, I was competent enough to understand what I was approaching when I went to the fintech booth, the employer's booth. But truthfully, when they started talking, they said all kinds of technical jargon. And there were white men in suits and ties. At the time, I was essentially a runaway teenage mom. And I thought, I don't understand what the hell these people are even saying to me. And so I respectfully, I just told him I don't think this is for me, and I didn't want him to continue his spill of their company because it wasn't clicking, it was not resonating. I couldn't understand a damn thing that was being said to me. It was like right over my head. And so that was kind of my first exposure. And so that led me to keep digging into technology, though, because, like I said, my circumstances had me very purposely driven to find my way to financial stability. Um, and so I knew that technology was a high paying career field. I also learned that healthcare was a high paying career field. And so I pursued exposure into both of those avenues. Uh, the healthcare stuff, mad respect to anyone who works in that industry, no matter what capacity. I worked in it for 3 months, and that was enough for me to know it's not for me for a lifetime. So, very difficult work, and mad respect for anyone that performs in that industry. So, that did lead me into pursuing more of the tech interest. And so, getting on at Jack Henry, I had someone I had worked with at a different company basically advocate for me. Like, hey, you're very capable of working on the Jack Henry service desk. They're building out the team. You should apply for it and see where it goes. And so I did. And I had a recommendation that was already internal to Jack Henry. So that was definitely connections. They equate to opportunities. I learned that right from the output of high school. And so I did an interview. I did a series of interviews. A lot of them were very difficult. They were panel interviews. They were with technologists. And truthfully, I didn't know that I made a good enough impression. They did not give me the job offer. I got a decline. But 3 months after that, they called me back and they opened up a second job, and I didn't have to re-interview for it. I made a strong enough impression, and they didn't see me for the circumstances that they did offer me a job. And so I started out on their help desk, and yeah, I didn't know how to send a damn email. I barely had typing under my belt. I had like maybe 3 months in high school at the very end of my senior year where my instructor just tossed a hand towel over my hands to block the keyboard so I didn't look when I typed. They only judged us or taught us how fast to type, basically.
Right.
And so when I got there at Jack Henry, I sat down at my desk, and it was super, super intimidating. It was very intimidating. Every aspect of that element was uncomfortable to me. I went into a building, and it was this big, beautiful campus. It was, it seemed like a professional building. That was nothing I had really dealt with in life or been exposed to. And I go sit down at my assigned cube, and like, first of all, I'm in a cube farm. WTF is a cube farm. That was my thought, but hey, it's a nice little private workspace and I got a computer. And so I started having to ask a lot of questions because I was doing a job I didn't know how to do. And so I found myself popping over to my neighbors over in the cube farm, like asking, how do I do this? How do I do this? And the culture at Jack Henry still to this day is so remarkable that everyone is super collaborative and they want to help everyone else grow around them and rise above. And like there's recognition and understanding that it takes a lot of different brains and perspectives and skill sets to do what we're doing at the scale that we're doing. And because so many people buy into that and understand that, it's a very collaborative culture. And so that guy ended up saying, "Hey, you know what? You asked me a lot of questions and I love helping you. But let's just pop out the Cube Farm panel here, and that way you don't have to get up all the time and ask me questions." That guy is still a mentor to me to this day. He eventually became one of my managers and then advocated and led me actually into a management job here at Jack Henry. So he helped me grow a lot from the very first service desk into becoming a technical expert and then eventually leading me into management. And now here I am in leadership and doing all the really fun things when it comes to business strategy and technology strategy and people.
Wow. That is awesome. And I love this story, man. You just jumped in, didn't really have a clue, and started figuring it out. But, one of your I don't know if it is a true personal core value or not, but one of your skills that you've already mentioned is you are curious by nature. Like you want to learn, you want to grow, you want to, figure out how to do things and educate yourself. What about, entry level job 18 years ago? How many jobs in Jack Henry? How many jobs slash and or promotions, different jobs have you held, in that 18 years?
Okay, so this is really fun. If we looked at my career progression, it would literally be the corporate ladder. And if it was charted out, you would see step, 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 step. So I started out very entry level. It was the highest paying job I had ever had in my life. And I was making $24,000 a year. It was
Yes,
amazing.
sir.
Yeah. And so that was my starting opportunity. And I went through the help desk track first. So I went through, they have their career plan. The career progression is where you can rank into different levels of technical expertise. You can become a subject matter expert over certain aspects of the technology stack or certain services of IT. And so I got to lead and learn through a lot of different subject matter expert roles before I decided, hey, I really enjoy making sure that the work flows in and out of the group, that people are following through on their commitments, and that we're delivering to the business goals. And so that led me into asking for a team lead job. And the team lead position wasn't actually a formal management role, but it was them basically allowing me a probation period to determine, is she made for management and leadership, or is she just really good technically and can manage at a technical capacity. And so I found myself doing really good at leading my peers, getting my peers to trust and respect me, and then translating the technical language into business language and business language into technical language, and basically bridging a communication gap between my team and the business leaders to make sure we were delivering. And so that led me into my passion for people, technology, and leadership. And then I've really dug into it since then. I've really over the last few years have enjoyed doing the technical stuff, the technical leadership, but I have gained greater exposure to the business strategies and the people strategies. And so now having some of that additional exposure along with my tech stuff is really serving me really well, as well as the people around me, because now we're not only developing technical strategies for a food business, it's actually all being woven together through our efforts, and then the resources are greater than just one division. It's literally the entire enterprise is the impact. And then I love it so much that our impact isn't just the enterprise. We serve, you know, most of America in banks and credit unions and financial services. And so our reach is greater than just our internal employees. It's our customers and then their customers who are literally people like you and me that out here using our debit card or our mobile apps. And so it's super purposeful work and I really do enjoy it.
Yeah, it's really cool that you love what you do, you're passionate about what you do and you see the purpose behind that. When you made that $24,000 that first year, did you like think you were rich?
Yeah, I thought, dude, that salary increase was probably at least 100% from where I was. And it definitely made me feel like I was living life different. But I'll tell you what, it not for long because Dustin and we had great aspirations and we had a purpose already. We were parents and we had a vision for becoming not just financially stable, but financially healthy. We
Mm.
wanted to break the cycle of poverty and become healthy so that we can teach our kids financial health and ultimately break the generational curses of that. So that's our mission now is we're focused on legacy building. We're focused on forming a family office with our assets in the family office so that our kids as they're becoming adults, start operating businesses within our organization, and then we hand them down to them and their kids, and also structuring it so that they have to work to earn from the family office and the family trust. And so, yeah, that's some pretty cool stuff that I've been learning lately is how to actually take the financial health and turn it into wealth that could be sustained greater than three generations of people.
Wow. One of my favorite podcasts is the Ed Milet Show. I love it. And he talks a lot about the power of the one, like I have the ability to be the one that changes it for all of ours to come, like, and you have in your family with 9 generations of repetitive, whatever, you have decided that you are going to be the one and you are changing it for everybody that comes behind you. Now, you may not really fully appreciate the value of that right now. But you're going to have kids that's going to have kids that's going to have kids that are going to look back and have someone they can look to and say, this person changed it. This person changed it for us. And it's pretty cool, when you can be the one, like I think that's really cool. You said something earlier that I would like for you to expand on. You said the culture at Jack Henry is really good. Why is the culture at Jack Henry really good? Like, how does that happen?
How does that happen? First of all, it's the people. I think there's a selection process that maybe we don't quite understand, but it's a behavioral fit type of selection. And that's kind of how it translates to me. But I think there's intentionality about making sure that there's human to human connection, kind of as we're deciding who we're going to bring into our organization as new team members. And we do a lot of recommendations and words of mouth. There's just team cohesiveness that happens. And I wouldn't say that it's always been super collaborative. As we grew, we went from small corporation to mid to large corporation, and there was growing pains. And as we added new companies in, we over my time at Jack Henry, we've done nearly 50 acquisitions. And so that's us buying other tech companies and fintechs and folding them into our organization, our culture, our technology, et cetera. And so I think just essentially having transparent and communicative leaders have really allowed that kind of trust and relationship at all levels of the organization. So my very first week at Jack Henry was super amazing because I was brought in to the headquarters with all the other new hires for the company from all across the country. We were all brought into the headquarter location to have lunch with the executive team. And then the executives really kind of instilled in us what their philosophies were, what their kind of the mission of Jack Henry, and we got that from the very first impression.
Oh,
And I think that spoke volumes, and I still think it speaks volumes. Our executive team and our senior leaders are very transparent. They're very intentional about communicating and building relationships and building trust with our customers and our employees. And I think just that type of leadership style has kind of spread, like a wildfire in a sense. And it really has grown to be the culture as we grew. That kind of culture was already instilled from some of our highest leaders and even the founders of our company. And it still exists today. I feel very proud to be a part of Jack Henry. I love the culture. I love that we're being extremely intentional about community outreach and getting our employees more involved in the community. It's a lot of where we live, and a lot of our families are growing across the country. So, yeah. What else can I answer for you on that one?
Well, I think it was a fantastic answer, and I really like that. I like the way that they bring everybody in and they just start throwing it out there, man. This is what we're about, from the very beginning. Like, I think that's awesome because, you learn, day one, like what this place is about. What's the values? Like, what do we stand for? How are we going to treat people? And, I think it's become obvious that the relationships within Jack Henry are good, and I'm a Jack Henry fan. Okay. I only know two people at Jack Henry, and I don't know how many employees Jack Henry has. My guess is it's rather large, but I know Sim Stogner and I know Rob Zelinka. Them's the two I know. And the two I know are really good, right? So I'm a Jack Henry fan. I'm a Jack Henry supporter. I can't hardly spell IT, so I don't really fully understand what y'all do for a living, but I'm sure it's important because I'm just sitting here right now looking at probably 25 different pieces of technology. So I know this stuff is important, but I think, y'all are absolutely fantastic. What makes you happy?
I love serving others. I think that's what makes me feel happiest. I think happiness is something that we have to kind of create and manifest for ourselves. And I feel this sense of like fulfillment and joy and purpose when I get to serve others and I get to help others rise to their potential in some way, shape, or form, whatever that might be. I think that's what makes me happiest.
What would you tell the person that's listening that may be stuck in a rut? Like they just, like they're not fired up about life. They wake up, they live a 24-hour day, they go to bed, they wake up, they just get in this cycle of not being happy, not being, like just they're not happy, And now, granted, if they're in that type of shape, they're probably not listening to this podcast, okay? So it may be a hypothetical question, but what would you tell the person that's in a life rut and they're not happy. They're not, they don't feel fulfilled.
If someone is feeling unfulfilled and not happy, I would tell them they need to take some time to reflect within themselves. And that reflection needs to be personal to them. It probably needs to be somewhere in a quiet space that allows deep conflict within yourself to confront why you're feeling so unhappy, because happiness is an emotion that we create and manifest for ourselves. I think it takes first the introspective state that that person's going to have to shift into and have real hard conversations with themselves, why they are not fulfilled, and then really dig into that and understand that it's not anyone else's job in the world to make them feel happy or fulfilled. They have to find what that means to them, and in order to find that, they have to understand what's making them feel unhappy and then address that, grow through it, seek out different resources, open their minds to other perspectives. I'm a human being who has dealt with that cycle. It's ebbs and flows. We all have this human element to where we feel unfulfilled and unhappy. And if we recognize that it's a human cycle of ebbs and flows that we live through, it's a lot easier to consciously bring ourselves out of that and regain happiness again.
I love that. It's an inside job first.
Yes,
Like
it is.
we got to figure it out first. You know what I'm saying? Like you can't pull happiness from somebody else. Like you got to look inside, be introspective. I love that. That's a great answer. Okay, I got a few questions and some of these I ask people on here because they're just interesting questions to me. So they're, the same questions that I will ask, some people. So I want to throw out a couple of them.
Okay.
I don't think you'll have an issue with because you've been around some really great leaders. Like the great leaders that you think of that have, helped you or been in your life or whether it be Jack Henry or whatever. What are some things that they have in common with each other? What are some skill sets or behavior skills that they have, that are kind of similar?
Okay, this is a good question because yes, I definitely surround myself with who I recognize are great leaders and at different levels of leadership too. And what I've recognized commonalities with who I identify as some of the best leaders, they're people who lead with clarity, they lead with courage, and they lead with humility.
Mm.
They, ultimately they know what they stand for, and then they create a space for others to rise with them. And ultimately, they're not afraid to evolve and have others doing the same around them. Those are those are the ones that I gravitate towards. I find them as the best leaders.
That is a great answer. Humility, courage, clarity, and every time I ask somebody, like the unanimous one, like, people have different words. Humility is always on the list. Like it just is like that. That is foundational to being not only a good leader, but probably being a good human, like not thinking less of yourself, but thinking about yourself less, right? Like that's, pretty clear. Okay. Let's go another one. I'm just curious if Sim had an entire day to yourself, zero responsibilities. Okay. So no Jack Henry, no five kids. What would you do? How would you spend that day?
Oh, this I'm dreaming up this day. I'm gonna manifest it soon. Hopefully in 2025 I actually get to live this day, but this day will be a day in nature with a notebook or journal and of course no schedule. And I would just be out there absorbing the sun's rays, taking in the vitamin D, reflecting, praying, and probably dreaming really big and a form of manifesting the next version of my vision.
That is awesome. I can help you with that. Me and my wife, because, just life's busy. We get going, right? And man, we're just knocking it out. And we took a trip because I have this nature thing that is kind of on my mind, like you, like, I know that there's benefits to being there. So I've kind of got this camping itch. Well, my wife does not have a camping itch. Like my wife does not even come close to having a camping itch, but we kind of come together on this yurt idea, like a yurt, like a little, it's like a glorified camping. So we went to a yurt in the middle of the woods in Eureka Springs, and it was awesome. Like we just didn't do anything. We had a 24-hour day in the middle of the woods in this yurt with a deck overlooking the woods, and like it was awesome. I was afraid that I would become bored, which I did not become bored. I wanted to stay another day or another 2 days, you know what I'm saying? Like, but it was really cool. So that'll be a great spot that you, if you can find a babysitter for them five kids, you and Dustin can go spend the night in the yurt. You know what I'm saying? Like, I'll help you make that happen. I promise you, because it was
Okay.
awesome. And there's a beautiful hot tub on the deck overlooking the woods with squirrels running everywhere. Like, it was fantastic. It was fantastic.
That sounds amazing. Definitely share that with me because I need to make that reality come true. And the perk about having five kids at three different generations is the older kids babysit the younger kids, and they're adults. So
Yes,
it works out
19 year
nicely
old
for
can
just fine.
Yes, the 19-year-old can babysit them all. That's awesome. You got a built-in babysitter. That's
Exactly.
I did not think about that. That is a perk of them being kind of staggered out. Okay, let's go one more because you've been super generous with your time, and I'm so thankful. And I honestly I have two screens. On my other screen over here, I have let's see how many questions. I had 15 questions that I had typed up about all different types of things, and I've asked absolutely zero of them. I've asked none of them. Like it was your story, and that's what I wanted it to be. So whenever you're generous enough for round two, we'll do this again, and I'll ask those 15 questions, okay? But
Okay.
this is the last one for today, I think. I've been known to go more than one, but whatever. If you could have dinner with three people of any time, living or not living, who would be the three people that you would love to sit around a table with?
Oh my gosh, this is the best question. I was hoping you would ask me this one whenever you said, "Hey, I might ask you these questions." First, I'm going to say Brene Brown
Mm.
for her values-driven leadership and how she models brave conversations. I have learned a lot from her, and every time I get a chance to hear her or watch her speak, it's like a wealth of knowledge and wisdom is transferred to me. And so I would definitely Brene Brown. And then the other two are very interesting. It would be a couple of my great grandfathers. And so it would be Chief Pomastabi and Chief Mashatubi. And they're both chiefs of the Choctaw Indians. And so really what I found as I've researched my family's heritage is they were both prominent leaders as you know the Removal Act was happening and during the Creek War. And so it'd be really interesting to talk to them too, because they were chiefs of the communities at a really profound time in American history. And they also were leaders, community leaders. And so I would love to hear more about like how they led people, how they got people to learn and grow as the Industrial Revolution was happening. And then one of them was known to be a really good communicator and a speaker, went to Washington, D.C., signed treaties. And so I would love to learn more about the history of my family's American lineage, American Indian lineage, but also learn from them because they were prominent community leaders for one of the third largest federally recognized tribes. And to know that they had oratory communication skills, I know that I have those same characteristics. And so I'd love to hear from them and what they envision their legacies to be like, and then ultimately see if I'm, making them proud.
Well, Simoriah, I would promise you that you are making them proud. They are looking down today, very grateful for what you are doing in this world. I mean, you inspire so many people. And every time I would tell somebody that, I had coffee with Sim and the comeback was, man, isn't she awesome? Like, isn't she, you are making an impact in the community. You are, you know, absolutely awesome. And anybody that's listened to this, I will guarantee you will, get through with this podcast and be super inspired by your story because there's no limits, like in this great country that we live in. You can't determine, how you come into this world. Like that's not your choosing. That's chosen for us. But what you do get is the opportunity to choose everything after that. When you know better, you can do better. And as soon as you knew better, you started doing better, and that's been a lifelong lesson. So you're going to inspire a ton of people. So, I'm super thankful for our friendship. I'm super thankful that I look forward to our friendship growing. Like I think, the world of you. I look for. I will probably see you in about a week or two at the Think Summit. Will you be at the Think Summit?
I will be there. I'm going to be listening to your talk and glued to the seat, and then, of course, hyping you on as the greatest hype girl in the crowd. Well, I
That's
can't
what I'm
take that
talking about.
credit. It might be Crystal Simon. She's a super awesome hype girl, too. So I'll find her and we'll make sure we bring the hype.
No doubt about it. I can't wait, man. Because I'm gonna tell you, and I think we have this in common because I'm a very curious human too. Like I don't really like I know that I have I'm gonna have a 20-minute deal and I'm gonna try to kill it because I want to add value to somebody. But I'm so excited about being able to sit there and listen to everybody else. Like that's what excites me, man. I love growing, I love learning, I love trying to be better than I am today. And that's the reason why this podcast started in the first place. Like I just like I want to be better and I want to try to help other people better and I want to bring Simoriah Stogner to more people in this world so that we can grow the inspiration that you've given me to everybody. So, I'm super grateful for you. I'm super inspired by you. If somebody wants to dive in deeper with Samara, where would they go? Where would you send them to find out more information about you?
So find me on LinkedIn, Simoriah Sim Stogner. And I'm really excited to tell you I have launched my own business called Simulating Mindsets. And so I am going to go ahead and drop out that they can find me on my website, simulatingmindsets.com.
That is awesome. And I will put links to all that in the show notes. What simulating mindsets, what type of business? Like, what are we doing?
Simulating mindsets is empowering minds and transforming lives. And so we're keynote speaking, we're
Yep.
workshops, we're coaching and development for personal and professional. And we're working on an AI talk workshop that will also bridge generations together. One of the things that I've learned recently is there's about 10,000 baby boomers leaving the workforce every single day.
Hmm.
And come 2030, that group of American workers are setting their sights on retirement. And so that's going to leave a huge deficit in the workforce. And so I have a passion to recruit other people into technology, at the same time, getting other people to leverage AI, because AI, I believe, is going to help close some of the wisdom gaps that we're going to lose as the baby boomers leave the workforce. And yeah, so it have a lot of different elements to it, but really around professional and personal development for teams and people.
That is awesome, and I can't wait. I will leave all that in the show notes. And I would say this, if and I speak for education because I'm in the education field. If you're in the education field, there's no reason in the world why you do not bring her in to speak to the kids in the school because, like what I do know is this, she has the power to impact kids because there are kids in school buildings that, have less than, or are going through things or has adversity and they're not sure, like what Sim can show us is your circumstances do not have to define you at all. Like if you want to be great, go get a dream. Just go get a dream. Start cutting out pictures out of a magazine and start building you a vision board, right? Like see it. If you can see it, you can go get it, and that's just, that's the nuts and bolts of it. And you will bring that to, you should be speaking at every school in the world. You know what I'm saying? Because that gives people hope. As long as there's hope, you have a chance. Without hope, there's no chance, and you do deliver. You could be a hope deliverer, you deliver hope. So, Sam, I'm so thankful for today. Thank you so much for, coming on and sharing your heart and sharing your soul with us. I really appreciate you.
Thank you, John. I have had so much fun having this conversation with you on the Never Stop Getting Better podcast, and I'm honored to be a part of this. And I look forward to continuing our relationship and friendship together.
Fantastic. And I appreciate everybody that has listened to this one. If I or if Sim can help you in any way, do not hesitate to reach out. I will put her email and I will put my email, as always, in the show notes. We'll help you any way we can. Until next time, adios, amigos.